Sure. What we're going to do now is we're going to go through a few worked examples of the business model canvas in practice for your nonprofit. We're going to look at two examples. One's going to be about a product business and one's going to be for a charity. They're not perfect, they don't apply to everything, but they'll give you a good sense of how we fill in each box and how the canvas all works together for your idea. We're going to look at a social enterprise cafe, a very popular business model, not just for the entrepreneurs, but also for charities. Cafes are seen as being a way of earning a quick dollar. Isn't quite that easy, and so we want to have a good look at what makes a successful social enterprise cafe work. As you remember, there are three lenses we're going to look at this canvas through: desirability, feasibility, and viability. Let's start with the desirability side of things. What we're going to look at is we're trying to understand who is our customer and why do they come here. I think most social enterprise cafes have three kinds of customers. Let's have a look at them. Our first customer is our tourists and our foot traffic. These are the people who just happen to be walking past, and what we see from their value proposition is they're people who are looking for a good, quick, tasty coffee. They don't want to hear your life story, they just want something right now and they want a chair with a back on it. Our second group of customers are probably people who work in the nearby area. So these are people who are looking for, again, quick coffee, somewhere to take a client, somewhere to take a break, and they want somewhere that's convenient, they want somewhere that's comfortable. Our third category is the social enterprise enthusiasts. And these are the groups who will travel quite a long way to come and see your cafe because they love the story. They like bringing people there. It's a good example of what a social enterprise is. And they love the ethical food. They love the fair trade coffee. They love your volunteers. They love the story. They're not price sensitive. Who knows how often they'll be back, but they're there for the mission, not the coffee. One thing that I find makes your life a lot easier when you're doing a business model canvas is to keep a very clear visual track as to which customer has which value proposition. In this case, we've got three different customers who are probably spending three different amounts of money, and we want to make sure we don't get them muddled all on the page. What I've done here is I've just simply numbered them 1, 2, and 3. Each of our customers have quite different customer relationships. It's quite a flaky sort of concept, but when you see it out here, it makes a lot of sense. So for our tourist and foot traffic customer, this is a short-term relationship. We probably won't see them again. We didn't do anything particularly special to acquire them, and there's not much we can do to retain them. The people who work in the building are a different story. These are going to be our regulars, and so we want to treat them really well. We want to understand how they work, but also we know that if that person then moves to a different office, we're probably not going to see as much of them. Our third category here is social enterprise enthusiasts, and these are ones where we're building quite a long-term, quite emotional relationship. We win them over, we have a customer for life. Similarly, our channels vary for each customer segment. So for our tourist customer, they physically walked in front of the building. Or maybe it's going to be that they found us on a TripAdvisor or something like that. For the people who work in the nearby area, the way they find you is you're physically right underneath their office. You're physically conveniently located there. They didn't seek you out, it just so happened you were in the right spot. For our social enterprise enthusiasts, they probably heard the story before they heard about your business. So it might be that they heard your founder speak at a conference, it might be that they read about you on a social enterprise blog, it might be that it was word of mouth. But generally they will have heard the story before they heard about the coffee. What we see with the social enterprise cafe model is that three different customers can come and order the same cup of coffee for three very different reasons. And that's fine, but we want to understand the psychology of it so we can design the best possible service for them. For some customers, they're just after a coffee. They might be a coffee enthusiast, they might be particularly sleepy one morning, but they just need the coffee right now. We've got another group of customers who see a different value proposition. The cafe and the coffee is really just a polite way of essentially renting a table for about 40 minutes. The coffee isn't something that they're not particular aficionados, but what they want is a good, quiet, warm meeting space they can bring someone else to work. There's also a third value proposition at play here. The story of the social enterprise and the concept of what it means to live in a sustainable way. So these are the people who, they love your organic food, they like your ethical suppliers, they love your volunteers, and they're really inspired by the fact that you're giving some or all of your profits away to charity. By contrast, the person who wanted a coffee could not care less about where your profit goes. They just want a really nice latte. One of the ways to sort of do a bit of a sense check of your value proposition is to say, which part of this is the deal breaker? That's often the really good way to identify the desirability side of things, is to go, what can't we afford to drop the ball on? So for some customers, it's going to be, if we're normally creating coffee that's 9 out of 10, we can't afford to create a coffee that's 8 out of 10. In Melbourne, inexcusable. For other customers, it's going to be, you know what, if we only donated 30% of our profits, people aren't going to be as excited as if we donate 100%. It's about understanding at what point the customer will it make or break their purchase decision. If you're looking at something and people don't really care, make whatever changes you want. But we want to understand which parts of the model are sacred and which parts are driving our revenue. So now we have a good idea as to what makes our business desirable. The next question is, how do we make it feasible? What needs to happen behind the scenes in order to make the show run? Let's look at the key resources. This is not a comprehensive list of everything you own. Coming back to the deal breakers point, these are the things that you can't afford to lose. So for a cafe, the first one is going to be your location. Maybe you're located in some cool back alley in Fitzroy somewhere, but for a lot of businesses, if you're relying on foot traffic, you need to have foot traffic. You need to be somewhere that people want to go. You also need a really good barista. It's one thing to be able to have volunteers who do, who help, bring out the coffee or they wash the dishes, but at the end of the day, you can't serve a subpar coffee. We need to have a really good barista and a really good chef if that's what's bringing people in the door. The next one we have in our resources here is our volunteer staff. Volunteers seem cheap, but they're actually quite expensive to run. They take up a lot of your time and a lot of your energy. It's a bit of a false economy. But in this case, the volunteers are part of what make the social story really, really impressive. So we want to list them here as being a core part of the model. We also have our brand and reputation. As I said before, there is just too many cafes in Melbourne to get away with delivering something that doesn't cut it. We know that a way that we attract people is by having a good reputation, by having a good social media presence, by having a good score on TripAdvisor, and that's something we need to actively maintain and actively acquire. So we're going to list it here as a key resource. Finally, the physical space itself, not just your street address, but we want to see the eclectic fit out, and it's very much the warmth and the personality of the room. That's what's bringing people in the door. That's what's bringing people in for a meeting. It's why they like going there. They like spending time there. So we need to make sure that that's always a really positive experience. This starts to drive our list of activities. So the first activity for any cafe is going to be making coffee. You need to make a really impressive cup. The next one is going to be fulfilling catering orders. Catering is very time intensive. It's very difficult, but it's also quite high value, as we're going to see when we get to our revenue streams. The next activity is customer service. We can't afford to have a bad experience, especially in a day and age where you have social media, people get to vote very quickly and very loudly if they've had a good experience or a bad one. This is going to be a priority. Food prep and inventory, as you'd expect for a cafe, pretty standard, but we can't afford to stop it. And the final one is social media and public speaking. If you're a social enterprise cafe, you probably have quite a nice story, and you probably it's a good way of attracting that sort of social enterprise enthusiast crowd. That only happens if you put yourself out there to spread that story as much as possible. Ordinarily, you wouldn't think that's part of a cafe's business model, but since that drives our value proposition, it's really important that we dedicate time and energy to it. Next, we have our key partners. These are the people who do the jobs that we don't want to do. So the first one we're going to look at is coffee suppliers and roasters. The big question is, what business are we really in? We don't need to roast our own beans. Someone else can do all the science and all the art behind that. We just want to buy a finished product because it makes our coffee great. We also have our pools of volunteers. These aren't people that we employ. These are people who love the brand, they love the story, they love where our profit goes, and they're the people who end up making our staffing and our volunteering all work. We also need a good landlord. We're not in the business of owning property that we're in, we're just renting it. And finally, we need a good network of ethical food suppliers. We need to make sure that we actually do what we say we will do, and we need to make sure that we're making the best possible choice at all times, because that's what's bringing in our social enterprise audience. Now it's time to look at the viability lens. This is about where do we spend our money and where do we make our money. It's incredibly important for non-profits to understand how they make money, because that's where their impact comes from. We can identify as non-profit in that, we're not keeping it for ourselves, but the more money we make, the more impact we can have. So, revenue streams. There are 3 types of revenue for our cafe. The first one is selling coffee. You're probably paying somewhere around $3 to $4 per cup. We also have lunches that we sell, and that's probably going to be somewhere between $10 and $20 depending on where you're located, who your customer is, and what people are buying. And the third one is catering, so we're probably looking at between $200 to $300 per day. The really interesting thing about these revenue streams for our customers isn't the price points. It's the frequency, it's the recurring nature. Our tourist customer may end up spending, $20 or $30, but they're spending that once. What's more lucrative for us in the future is to make good friends with the people in our building, because they're the ones who might be ordering catering once a month, and they're the people who are coming in for coffee once a day. That doesn't seem like a big difference, on a per day rate, but over the course of a year, they're quite different customer segments. The interesting thing about this particular type of revenue stream is that it's all ongoing, it's all recurring revenue. We're not selling something once and then the customer gets to keep it. People have to come back each day. This is a bit of a double-edged sword for a social enterprise cafe, because what it means is for our fans who like us, they're a constant source of revenue. What it also means is we need to make sure we're delivering a really good experience, because if we don't, that revenue dries up very, very quickly. There are no contracts, there are no obligations. People come in every day and they get to vote with their feet and they vote with their wallet. What we also see is that a customer can progress from one to another to another. People might start by coming in for coffee because they've heard the story, because they're walking past, whatever it may be. That kind of person, if they have a good coffee, is probably going to think, the food here is probably going to be really good as well. And once they see that, then we start to get to the real money, which is in the catering. It's much larger orders. It's quite time intensive, as we can see from our activities and costs. It is expensive to do catering, but it is also quite lucrative at the same time. What we're also seeing here is that we have most of our customer segments aren't particularly price sensitive, particularly the ones who are there for the story. These are the kind of customers who aren't picking catering based on price. They're picking catering based on their philosophy and their worldview. They want to send a message, they want to explain what a social enterprise is. Our cafe is the logical choice. Now, each individual coffee is a different story. In Melbourne, we sort of have an expected market price as to what we can afford to pay for a coffee. It may well be that you're able to have more impact if you charge $6 for a latte. Unfortunately, we're not at the point yet where people are willing to do that. When there's that much choice in the market, you have to do what people are expecting you to do. So in this case, the $3.80 is, there's some margin in that, but we need to be very careful about pushing it too much higher. Finally, let's have a look at our cost structure. Let's see where our money gets spent. One of the dangers about a cafe model is you're spending a lot of money on staff and ingredients, irrespective of how many people walk through the door. So we see that the first thing we're looking at is wages. We need a good chef, we need a good barista, we need a good table staff. They're not cheap. We also are then paying for the actual ingredients themselves. Fortunately, these are what we call a variable cost. So if we sell twice as much coffee, we're going to go through twice as many beans, but that's okay because it's twice as much revenue in the door. Rent is going to be a big one. This is a recurring cost and it's a fixed cost. So we're going to pay the same amount for rent every month, irrespective of how many people we get. We want to be really careful with this calculation because this one could make or break the viability of the model. And finally, we have things like maintenance and utilities. These aren't particularly glamorous things, but it's just cost of doing business. We want to understand how much we're expecting to spend per month so that we can calculate how many coffees, lunches, and catering events we need to do to break even. Not all social enterprises are selling a product. A lot of times we have a not-for-profit that's doing a lot of good work and is looking for a donation. This requires quite a different business model. So let's look at an example now. So when we look at who is the customer segment for a non-profit or for a charity, I think we tend to see three main types of customer. The first one here is the one-off donor. So this is someone who's made a donation once and they have no intention of giving you any money again. This might be someone who they signed up because their friend was raising funds for you. It might be they physically handed over some cash in the street, or it might be that they found one of your campaigns and gave a single donation and didn't leave any of their details. The next category we have is someone who's giving a recurring sponsorship. So this is, if you think of like World Vision sponsor a child program, that's really a good sort of model we're all familiar with to think of for that sort of thing. This might be an individual or it might be a family, and it's someone who is committed to giving $10, $20, $100 a month to a particular cause for an ongoing basis. The third category we see is much larger, and that's our corporate donors. This is a group who, for whatever reason, they've decided to give you $15,000 towards your particular campaign, and they might bring one of those large novelty checks, and it's going to be quite a well-publicized sort of affair. The really interesting thing is, what are the different value propositions that drive each customer segment? So let's start with our one-off donor. My belief is that you don't tend to see many people who go, I am temporarily passionate about your cause for the next 10 minutes. I don't think you see that. I think what happens is people go, my friend is raising money for this particular organization. I've never heard of that organization, but I do like my friend. So for me, it's about the story of I'm going to help this person with their 100-kilometer walk, or they're growing, they're doing Movember, or they're shaving their head, or whatever it's going to be. So this person, I've listed them here as your customer. It's almost the person who's raising the money that's the real customer here. For these donors, they're not aligned to your particular brand at first. The thing that's gotten them in the door is someone in their network has advocated for your organization. That's going to be really important in a minute. Our second customer is our recurring sponsorship. These are people who they love the story, they love the impact, and they want to be committed to giving in an ongoing way for the indefinite future. Third is our corporate donor. What are they looking for? I think what we see here is that these are companies who are looking for some sort of brand alignment. I don't want to be too cynical and say it's all about public relations, but I do think that is a part of it. It's about what will persuade an organization to give us $20,000, serious money. And I think it comes down to the PR, to the storytelling, to that shared vision. And again, it sounds cynical, but sometimes it's also the tax advantages. It's because people go, there is something in it for us. This is an effective way of us giving money, and we get some sort of benefit at the same time. Again, I don't want to sound overly cynical about it, but it is what motivates people. It's why charities are tax deductible. It's why people get receipts. It's what motivates that behavior. So how do these relationships unfold? I think we see a different type of relationship for each different customer. For our one-off donors, this is short-term and it's automated. You may never get their details. This might be someone who they physically put a $10 note in a collection box somewhere. For our monthly givers, it's long-term, but it's still automated. They've committed to an ongoing donation, but they might have never actually met anyone of your team. They may have never actually seen the impact of your work. Our corporate donors, though, are probably a more personal relationship. This might be your fundraising manager, it might be your CEO or the board. They might have met with them, they might have had you might have given a physical presentation, but it's going to be a much more one-to-one sort of relationship for a longer period of time that tends to attract those sort of larger donors. Our channels are quite different accordingly. For our one-off donation, the channel is actually the friend who is raising funds. They become one of your best advocates. For the people who are on a recurring sponsorship sort of thing, it might be advertising, it might be articles, it might be social media posts, it might be videos they saw on Facebook. It's going to be somewhere that they saw your story communicated in over the course of a few minutes. For our corporate donors, it's probably by meeting with your team. It might even be someone that you've taken to actually meet the beneficiary of your work. It might be someone you've taken out into the field, or to meet with the young homeless kids, or to actually see your environmental program actually play out. That's what really connects your corporate customers to the story, and that's what then leads them to go, we would like to give a substantial amount of money on an ongoing basis. Charity mugging is quite a polarizing channel. I really dislike it, but then you think about the reason it's a thing is because it works. Charity mugging is a really effective way of getting people to sign up to an ongoing commitment. So that person there with their iPad, they're not after $5, they're actually after an ongoing commitment. They want to turn a potential one-off donor into a monthly recurring donor, and that's because that's much more lucrative. You see figures on average of your customer staying with you for between 5 to 7 years. That's quite a lucrative customer, so that's why these people are putting their effort into creating an ongoing long-term relationship rather than just an on-the-spot donation. The thing I don't like about charity mugging is that it's opaque. I think if people actually understood the process of how that financial transaction works, they'd probably think twice about giving to that sort of thing. So the charity muggers work generally for an outsourced company, and that company tends to take about 90% of the first 10 or 11 months of the donation. So you might agree to give $20 a month to UNICEF or something like that, but what's happened is for the first year, the majority of it's gone to the English backpacker or the company that they worked for. It's obviously effective, because if it wasn't, then these companies they're really smart. They wouldn't be doing it if it didn't work. But I always feel icky about something where if people knew how it actually worked, they might give through the website instead of through the person on Burke Street. We talk about the three lenses: desirability, feasibility, and viability. I feel like for a lot of charities, it really just is that desirability lens that we were really trying to reshape in this sort of canvas model. The reason I say that is a lot of your organizations, they've been going for 5, 10, 15 sort of years. You know your key activities, you know your resources, you're not looking to innovate that particular aspect of it. You know your margins, you know your KPIs, that's all fine. The real question is, how do we find new customers? The old type of charity customer is dying off rather quickly, and we need to find a new sort of donor who has a new set of motivations and things that prompt them to give money. What's interesting is that we see a lot of typical for-profit businesses and startups. They do the desirability component really well. They do the customer insights bit really thoroughly, and they understand, the psychology as to what motivates people and what makes them decide to give money, what made them, feel generous in the first place, and also then things like, how do we inspire someone to give us $30 a month rather than $20? Or what's the difference between getting someone to give us $200 once versus, $15 a month? That part is something that hasn't really been explored a lot in a lot of charities. And I think the Canvas does a really good job of prompting you with those questions to say, who's my customer? Why do they donate? How are they going to pick a particular price point? And what makes them stay or what makes them leave? What makes or breaks the decision to give another donation next year? So let's look at the key resources behind a charity. Obviously, you're not selling a product, you tend to be selling a story, and that's starting to play out here in the resources box. The number one thing you have up your sleeve is your brand and your reputation. It's also one of the most delicate, fragile things you can have in your model. So this is about people's perception as to your brand, what you do, if you're responsible with your money, do people think you have genuine impact, and do people get the story of what it is that you're doing? That's quite an intangible resource. It's not like we own a shop front or anything like that. It's often quite hard to measure, but it's also really important to defend. Your other resources are things like your impact work and your beneficiaries out in the field, the stories of your success, the stories about for the donor, it's very much a case of, I gave this much money and it created this much impact. It's as I said, it's quite intangible. It often can feel quite flaky, but getting a really clear story is what makes you desirable in the first place. You've also probably got 3 different types of staff, and I want to treat them as 3 different categories because the way you recruit them and the way you retain them is all quite different. The first one is your management team. So this might be your CEO, this might be your main management team, that sort of thing. That's quite different to your delivery team, who are the people who are actually out in the field, wherever that may be, actually running the impact work. So this is your social workers, this might be your missionaries, this might be your teachers, this might be your tree planters, whatever it's going to be. The third one is your fundraising and marketing team. And this is probably where you want to spend quite a lot of time and energy. Is the success of your model is the ability to turn prospective donors into ongoing, recurring donors. You want a good fundraising and marketing team. You're going to recruit them differently and you're going to retain them differently. Key activities. What do we actually do in a typical week? The big one is we actually go and run our impact projects. We actually need to do what we say we will do. We need to go out there and actually change people's lives and make the world a better place. We also are going to spend quite a lot of time on marketing and fundraising. That's what keeps the lights on. That's what gets our customers in the door. We do need to dedicate a lot of attention to actually making those stories come to life. And the third one is going to be publicity and speaking at events. It's going to be communicating one-on-one or meeting with those larger donors, or it's going to be telling that story. Key partners, this is industry specific, so you'll already know these. I'm not going to teach you about new partners. These are the groups who are doing the work that you don't want to do in-house. So this might be other groups who advocate for you, it might be groups who you partner with to deliver your impact, it might be groups who give you other donations of things in kind. Key partners are a great way of outsourcing the things that you're not particularly strong at in-house. So for example, you might choose to use an external marketing and branding agency to design your campaigns. If that's not the kind of thing that you want to run with your internal team, and it might be a very wise decision, it's worth paying someone else like a fixed sum of money to do it really, really well, because that's what's going to drive new donors coming in the door. Again, for-profit businesses, they do not blink at spending money on getting their advertising right. I think we see the same thing here for charities. It feels strange spending a lot of money on branding, but ultimately that's how you're getting revenue and that's how you're going to be able to create more impact in the future. If there's something that you can't do in-house, you're very wise to outsource it with a talented partner. And finally, we see the viability, the 2 financial ones. So we have our revenue streams. So we've got a small one-off donation. It might be $5, $50, something in that sort of range. We've got our recurring monthly donations, which is going to be from our ongoing partners, and then we've got our larger annual donations. These are the photo opportunities with the giant novelty check. For our cost structures, we see, first of all, our office staff. Now, our back office is going to be quite expensive. So these are going to be things like our management team, it's going to be our fundraising, marketing, those sort of costs. We then have to pay our fieldwork staff. This is to actually make the impact possible. We then have rent for our buildings, and we also have the cost of actually running our fundraising, our marketing campaigns. So this is the cost of publishing our newsletter, this is the cost of sending out letters to all of our donors, it's the cost of actually running a good campaign that actually gets in front of 1 million eyeballs. Business modeling is not fun. Business modeling is, it's useful. It's useful because like the process is hard. Like actually building one of these and taking, especially for when you're the founder, the process of trying to take everything you know and putting it on just one page, just putting it on one canvas. It can almost feel patronizing at first. It can almost feel like, well, this business is not overly simplistic. And I think simple and simplistic are two very different ideas. We want to be able to, yes, say, not everything fits on this page, but we should be able to get down to the essence of the model. We should be able to get down to the essence of what makes our charity work, why people like us, why people support us. Getting it on this page, I'm going to warn you, it is going to feel like a painful process at first. What I will tell you is it's worth it, and once you've done the first one, every incremental one you do from there becomes much, much easier. Now we're done. You've seen how it works. The best thing you can do now is get started. Good luck.